Good evening. I'd like to call our, I'd like to call our meeting to order. It is 6 p.m. and this is our regular school board meeting, October the 17th, 2023. Our land acknowledgement. The school board would like to take this moment to respectfully acknowledge that we are residing on the traditional land of the Dene people. Our mission statement is to provide an excellent, equitable education and a safe, supportive environment so all students will succeed and contribute to a diverse and changing society. The Pledge of Allegiance, Ms. Barnett, which is going to lead us tonight. Thank you.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Ms. Richardson, would you please call the roll?
Colonel Alvarado is on Zoom. Are you there, sir? He is on Zoom. Colonel Cole is excused. Mr. Lopez?
Here.
Mrs. Burnett?
Here.
Mrs. Matheson is excused. Mrs. Smith?
Here.
Mrs. Hardy?
Here.
Miss Marati?
Here.
Mr. Dorn?
Here.
Mrs. Sanderson?
Here.
Thank you. The board has a quorum.
All right, thank you. Next on our agenda is the recognizing our two school board members, Maggie Matheson and Ms. Smith. So, I want to give comments for Ms. Matheson and her service to the board and the community. Passionate, engaged person who was engaging on our board. Maggie is working and collaborating with to bring a program to our district that will enable our students to seek a different CET, Career Technical Education pathway. I'm sure details will probably be worked out, but she has been able to network with other community leaders about a dental hygienist program. So it's something that she was passionate about, as that is one field she serves, not only on our board, but as a dental hygienist and as an adjunct professor. So I think with her networking with people across our community, that's going to be important to our students. So we wish her well in the next endeavor, as she has raised 3 young athletes and students through this community, and they are now pursuing their goals and dreams. So thank you, Maggie, for your work. Next, is there any comments from the board? Go ahead, Mr. Doran.
Thank you. I'd like to add my thanks and appreciation to Maggie Matheson for her service on the board the last 3 years. And you used the word, her passion that she brings to what she does. And I had the words enthusiastic expression. I really appreciated when she'd come and talk about school events, activities, things going on that she experienced not only with her own children, but with other students in our district. She really did that with enthusiasm, good support, and I appreciate her advocacy for public education. So it was good to get a chance to know her some over these last 3 years.
No further comments. Our next member that we are recognizing tonight is Miss April Smith. And you can definitely say that Mrs. Smith has been a strong advocate on this board as a mother of 10 children, and that she's raising They are active members of our community. At least one of her children was set on our board as a student representative. Her own unique, powerful person, Miss Olivia Smith. So in her advocacy, all the way from Juneau to writing letters to the governor, having perspective in the newspapers, Ms. Smith has shown herself to be, Mrs. Smith has shown herself to be a very dedicated board member. Always came prepared, always did research. Sometimes she read stuff that I wouldn't read, but she was always researching and trying to find answers and networking with people all across this community. It is powerful to watch her advocate from the seats and stands in Juneau, having traveled with her and spent 3 days there. Her tenacity when she's engaging them, she's very bold, she's very precise, and sometimes she doesn't take no for an answer. So they really got to hear her and see her passion and dedication, that she is a very strong advocate that education should be fully funded and that we should have a vision of what we want and what a fully funded education looks like for our students in this community and in our schools. So I appreciate what she brought to our board, the being able to stay focused and to have things in order and stay in our path, in our lane. That was also a passion of hers. So her work that she's done as committee chairs has been very important. This past couple of weeks, we've done 2 days here with our policies. That was a goal of mine, to address policy, to review and amend, and that's a huge task. But April was definitely up for the challenge, doing the research, and there's still work that will be coming forward that she has put work on and been able to network with our community partners. So I'm thankful for her work and for her dedication to this board. Anybody? Ms. Barnett, then Mr. Dorn.
I would just like to take a second and thank both Mrs. Matheson and Mrs. Smith for their time and service on the board. It's not easy being in a public eye, not easy putting yourself out there, especially in the name of children. So just thank you for your last 3 years, and I wish you the best.
Mr. Dorn.
Thank you. And again, I want to express my thanks and appreciation to April Smith for her service on the board. And to me personally, a couple of things that really stood out to me over these last 3 years is you're a listener. And I realized that sometimes because you quoted me, which I thought, I mean, that showed how you listened. And whether we agreed or disagreed, you tried to put ideas together. And I appreciated that. I appreciated and enjoyed our conversations down, whether they were at McDonald's with your little one or at some of the ASB boardsmanship trainings. We could bounce ideas back and forth. I could use you as a resource to ask a question. So from this perspective, or you could ask me. And I found those conversations very valuable, and I really appreciate that. And the last comment I put here, and this is in the most positive manner, you're a thought provoker. You made me go after, as President Sanderson said, you researched stuff, you did some readings, you made me go after some of those readings and do some of that background work. And to look and weigh my perspectives of my thoughts at a given time. And I think that was a wonderful contribution that you made to me in helping me, I hope, to be a better board member. So thank you for all that you've done, your service the last 3 years.
All right. The next item on our agenda is the adoption of our agenda by consensus.
Move to adopt the agenda with consent items by consensus.
Hearing no objection.
Second.
Hearing no objections, the agenda is now adopted. So we have public comment on the consent agenda items that are marked with an asterisk are considered routine items not requiring public discussion by the board. And unless removed from the consent agenda, asterisk items will be automatically approved when the agenda is adopted. Questions concerning these items should be directed to the administration before the meeting. If the superintendent or a member of the public wishes to have an item removed from the consent agenda, the request must be made to a board member anytime prior to the start of the meeting. The board member has the discretion to accept or deny the request. Only a board member may remove an item from the consent agenda. If an item is removed from the consent agenda, it shall be considered separately as the last item of new business. Asterisk items will then be adopted by one single motion. At this time, okay, that's right. We don't have anything. Okay, so right now we're going to move on to public comments. Item D. Let's click on this. Public comments on report and non-agenda items are limited to 2 minutes per person with a maximum of 1 hour. People who have signed up in advance through the school board office to testify in person or by Zoom will be called upon first, and if time remains, anyone else who is in person will be invited to testify until the 1 hour time limit has been reached. A person testifying shall state their full name, spelling their last name, and their city of residence for the record. Board members may ask questions for clarification. Although there is time at the end of each meeting for the school board and the superintendent's comments, some comments may need to be able to be addressed immediately, may not be able to be addressed immediately, as additional information may be needed to be gathered. So, and do we have anyone in the public that would like to come forth and testify on a non-agenda item? Seeing none, and public testimony is now closed. Think we have a Borough Assembly report. Don't see anybody from the room, so that leads us into my report. And I would like to start my report by the activity that I was able to be a part of is witnessing the Project Search reception. And Project Search is one of our programs here at the district who work with students who have disabilities, and they are in partnership with the Fairbanks Memorial. I know I'm missing something. Health Partners. And at the reception, each student makes a presentation board, and basically it starts to talk about what their position is, what their activities are, how they carry out their duties every day. It's very rewarding to see the young people who are engaged at their own capacity to be able to be employed, feel good about what they're doing, and be a part of our community and our workforce. So it is a program that I really would like to see us highlight and showcase. They have been doing this work, I believe, for 9 years or more. Yeah, so it is a very powerful program, and it was very honoring just to be there amongst them to celebrate their accomplishments. And the other thing I was able to participate in was really an awesome experience. 300 or more students from across the state of Alaska, from all over. I know there were people from Sandpoint, there were people from Bartlett High, from Wasilla, Palmer area, and those students emerged on West Valley High School, and so totally took it over for Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So they carried out their legislative or delegated assembly under OSOG, and I'm sure there'll be some resolutions that came forward. And their opening ceremonies were really pretty cool. And each each delegation group of students had a chant, and they got pretty rowdy in there. So I was just like, hurrah and hooraying and clapping and, entering into it. But it's awesome because basically, not basically, truly, they are the next leaders. There was 300 of them in that room, and I'm pretty sure we're going to be hearing their names across our community in some fashion or form of legislative or city council or borough assembly or school board. So they're learning it right, they're learning it early, and I'm sure they're going to be our next leaders across the state. And I feel that they're very passionate, they're very focused about what they're doing. And as young people, they have a different view on how things are going to be legislative and how they're going to carry out things in their form of justice and how they advocate for each other. So it was very powerful to witness that taking place. And that completes my, Mr. Dorn.
Thank you for your report. And just something that I know we have not had a chance as a board to do, but mindful of the ordinance before the Borough Assembly to change the municipal election dates from October to November, and they're in the middle of that conversation. They'll be continuing it on Thursday evening. Public comment is closed, but I know did not have a chance between our happened between our meetings, that perhaps we could, just through the chair, put a tickler out there to include it as an agenda item, possibly for our November 7th meeting. It may depend upon what the decision of the assembly is on Thursday night, but if it is to change the dates, I think that as a board, we should have a chance to weigh in on that since it would directly impact us. So,
All right, next we go to the superintendent and his report. Thank you, Dr. Marnick.
All right. Thank you, President Sanderson. And I'd like to echo your sentiments about the OSAG conference. It was an amazing conference. And our students are not only going to be the leaders of tomorrow, they're the leaders right now. I had the opportunity to interview Shelby Seekins and Liam Wade yesterday. And I told them that same thing, that don't limit yourself thinking about tomorrow because you're making change right now. And so just so thankful for the powerful student leadership skills we have here in the Fairbanks North Star Borough School District. And they put on an amazing conference for students across the state. We are in the October count period. Good news that our numbers are slightly up from our 10-day projection. The bad news is we're slightly down where we projected for this year, about 125 students. We're sitting just over 12,500 students for our October count. The district received an update from the Department of Ed that we will not receive Alaska STAR scores from last April's testing window until March of 2024. DEED committed to a multi-year approach to design and review AK STAR that included development of achievement level descriptors and standard setting process in 2022. They followed that with a validation study and a policy review committee in 2023, which some of our stakeholders here in Fairbanks participated in. And now that DEED has updated the cut scores to align with the stated goals of AK STAR, DEED has initiated the State Board of Education approval process. And so that's what's causing the delay and the release of scores for us. The school district will be participating in the Great Alaskan Shakeout Earthquake Drill on October 19th at 10:19 a.m. This is a national event to practice earthquake preparedness and response. And if you've lived in Alaska, you know that earthquakes can happen. For more information on the event, you can visit the Great Alaskan Shakeout and get ready if you'd like to participate in that at your local organization. Fairbanks School District did partner with UAF and hosted a college and career fair recently up at UAF at the Wood Center. We had over 80 vendors from colleges and universities, trade schools, labor unions, military representatives, and local emergency fire and personnel. We had over 300 students that attended the event. So great turnout from both our students and then our counseling staff that also attended that event. It was fun to run into counselors while I was there because they were getting just as much out of the event as the students, and it wasn't something that I had anticipated as we hosted the event, but it was a professional learning opportunity for them so that they could further see what kind of opportunities are out there for our students and connect our students with them. We look forward to continuing that partnership with UAF next year and hope to get even more students up on campus. I'd like to congratulate the Literacy Council of Fairbanks. It's celebrating its 50th anniversary, and next week they'll have a celebration up at Birch Hill. And I'm very honored I've been invited to attend and provide some brief remarks to attendees. I'm honored to participate and thankful for the shared mission the school district has with the Literacy Council in ensuring all of our community is literate, as it has significant impacts on citizens' quality of life and major impacts on our community. And that's just a great example of a local partnership that the school district has. I'd like to thank the school board for their dedicated work with AASB reviewing our policies in conjunction with AASB's model policies and the structure of their policy manual. This is a heavy lift and was a historic moment for the school district and school board to take on. And I'm looking forward to the report that we received back from AASB and scheduling additional work sessions for the board to go through the recommended changes of each chapter. That'll be some heavy lifting for the board ahead, but some real important work for the school district. I'd like to recognize the following donors: Lathrop High School Wrestling Booster Club, Laurel and Charles Caswell, West Valley High School Football Cheer, Alaska Power Cum Supply, they donated to the Lathrop High School football team, and Jeans Chrysler donated to the West Valley High School rifle team. A couple shout outs. Regional Student Council, which I mentioned earlier, and then the Lathrop High School football team is state bound, and we wish them well and good luck. Let's make that miracle happen. Lastly, I'd like to conclude my remarks talking about student safety in our schools. Our school district is deeply committed to prioritizing the safety and well-being of our students. We take concerns related to safety and bullying with the utmost seriousness. And it's essential to emphasize that not everything posted on Facebook or social media platform is actually factual. We encourage our school community to communicate such concerns through appropriate channels with the district, allowing us thoroughly to investigate and address each case with care and attention it deserves. Our goal is to create a safe and respectful environment for all students and staff and our stakeholders that visit our schools, and we rely on accurate and verified information to achieve this aim. It's also important to note that there's limitations on the district's ability to share certain information based on FERPA, Family Educational Rights and Privacy Act. And while we're dedicated to addressing each individual concern, we must adhere to FERPA guidelines, which protect the privacy of student educational records. Additionally, as you'll hear tonight on our report on the district's climate survey, we're working incredibly hard in our classrooms and schools to work with students on self-management skills, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. As part of the school action plans this year, each principal with their staff examine their climate survey results and have actionable plans in place to address each area of concern. And then lastly, I just want to thank all of our educators for showing up day in and day out and sacrificing so much on behalf of our students. So thank you. That concludes my report.
All right, thank you. We have Ms. Barnett and Mr. Dorn.
Thank you for your report, Dr. Miner. Just a quick question related back to the beginning with the test scores. I'm just curious if there's going to be some sort of impact or any for our district that's related to the delay in test scores.
There won't be any impact, and we are excited to get the scores because something that we've lacked historically now is longitudinal data for the summative assessment at the state level. But the school district has been administering the MAP assessment, which you'll hear tonight how important that is to the day-to-day kind of operations of school and the instruction that we provide our students. So no real operational impact to the school district.
Mr. Dorn. Thank you. Superintendent Meinert, again, a question on the Alaska Star and the data. Since it'll be going to the state board in two steps, one for them to consider whether it's ready to go out for public comment, and then after it goes out for public comment to actually accept the whatever is decided on the cut scores. Would it be what I'm looking for is an opportunity for our district to weigh in on those scores and the consideration if the suggested cut scores are accurate and will give us the information we need. I know that we only have a chance to testify, well, twice, regarding what is put out there, suggested by deed, and then what is adopted by the state board. We still don't know that there has not been any analysis of the test itself. So that'll be a separate issue, but related. So I give, my bottom line request is that we take a chance to really look at those. And if there is a district response, we take an opportunity to do that. And also keep the board informed, since it's one of those things I've testified with the state on previously.
Absolutely. I'll keep you informed as I hear additional information.
All right. We have no unfinished business, so we move into our new business. Under new business, we have Resolution 2024-09, honoring Alaska Native and American Indian Heritage Month.
Move to approve Resolution 2024-09, honoring Alaska Native and American Indian Heritage Month.
Second.
Ms. Marati, can we get you to read the resolution?
I would be honored. Honoring, Fairbanks North Star Borough Board of Education, Resolution 2024-10, honoring Alaska Native and American Indian Heritage Month. Whereas Alaska Natives were the original inhabitants of the land that now constitutes the Fairbanks North Star Borough, and whereas Alaska Natives value and respect traditional knowledge and skills, as well as classroom education, and whereas students of Alaska Native and American Indian heritage are a significant population of the Fairbanks North Star Borough School District student body, and whereas Alaska Native and American Indian parents and guardians are engaged in their students' education, and whereas teachers of Alaska Native and American Indian heritage distinguish themselves as educators in the Fairbanks North Star Borough School District classrooms, and whereas principals and administrators of Alaska Native and American Indian heritage lead their schools and the district with vision, and whereas Alaska Natives and American Indians have served the school board with distinction, and whereas Alaska Native and American Indian paraprofessional and classified staff support all students learning, and whereas November is the time we traditionally give thanks for the abundance of our blessings, it is an important time to celebrate the historic and current role the voices of Alaska Natives and American Indian have contributed to our nation, state, borough, and school district. And whereas incorporating Native ways of knowing and the Alaska cultural standards into the curriculum and teaching the contributions of Native history, culture, society, and language in the classroom promotes academic success for Native students and increases the understanding of all students. Now, therefore, be it resolved that the Fairbanks North Star Borough Board of Education proclaims November 2023 Alaska Native and American Indian Heritage Month and encourages staff, students, and parents to honor through interactive research, classroom lesson plans, guest speakers, displays, lectures, practical activities, and cultural celebrations throughout the year.
Thank you. Would you call the roll? Oh, I'm sorry. Is there anyone from the public having comment on Resolution 2024-09? Seeing none, we go back to the board for comment. Ms. Hardy and then Mr. Dorn.
I just want to say I'm pleased to be able to support this resolution as a student who grew up in this district, visiting the Alaska Room and getting to learn about the rich and diverse culture of our Alaska Native individuals that have stewarded this land. It's good to see that we have this recognition, and I'm looking forward for a closer collaboration as the board moves forward with that community.
Mr. Dorn?
I'm glad to speak in support of this resolution, and I'm mindful of several things. our land acknowledgement right at the beginning of our meeting, the efforts of our Alaska Native Education program to reach students and educators throughout our district, and the partnerships that are exemplified through some of our community partners, Fairbanks Native Association, Tanana Chiefs Conference, Dayan, and many of the other regional corporations and both profit and nonprofit around our state that our students and parents are part of. And I was also reminded going through this, the fact that many of our schools have artwork that was done by Alaska Native artists and are seen every day by our students. I'm most mindful of the totem pole that happens to be at Denali and represents the story of love, kindness, and respect. But each of our schools has aspects that they bring forth in their own communities that are reflective of a lot of the Alaska Native cultural values that are important to our students and staff. So just want to say thank you very much for all those efforts.
Ms. Burnett?
Just wanted to say that I would be proud to support this.
Ms. Richardson, would you please call for the vote?
Mr. Lopez,
Yes.
Colonel Alvarado, I think he's having mic issues. Are you there, sir? Thank you. Mr. Doran,
Yes.
Mrs. Burnett,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Hardy,
Yes.
Ms. Maradi,
Yes.
Mrs. Sanderson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried.
All right, thank you. Next on our agenda is recognizing American Education Week. Resolution 2024-10 proclaims the week of November 13th through the 17th, 2023 as American Education Week, providing the opportunity to recognize public education and honor the team of people who work in our public schools. Everyone from bus drivers, custodians, classroom teachers, to the nutrition service workers, teachers' aides, administrative staff, countless others who are making a difference in ensuring every student receives a quality education.
Move to approve Resolution 2024-10, recognizing American Education Week.
Second.
Ms. Smith, could you please read the resolution?
Fairbanks North Star Borough Board of Education, Resolution 2024-10, recognizing American Education Week. Whereas public education in Fairbanks dates from 1904, and whereas strong system of public education has created opportunity for generations of citizens to recognize their abilities and realize their potential, and whereas American Education Week presents the citizens of Interior Alaska with a wonderful opportunity to celebrate public education and honor individuals who are making a difference in ensuring that every child receives an excellent and equitable education, and whereas public support of education is as important today as it was in 1919 when American Education Week was first established, and whereas many influential organizations, including the National Education Association, the Parent Teacher Association, the American Association of School Boards, and the U.S. Department of Education, lend their support to this recognition, and whereas a National Education Week is for the purpose of informing the public of the accomplishments and needs of the public schools and to secure the cooperation and support of the public in meeting those needs. And whereas the educators, parents, and community partners who guide our children through the many milestones of learning deserve our highest admiration, respect, and support for investing in young people's futures. And whereas we all have a stake in public education and we all have a role to play. Now, therefore, be it resolved, the Fairbanks North Star Borough Board of Education proclaims the week of November 13th to the 17th, 2023, in recognition of American Education Week, providing the opportunity to recognize public education and honor the team of people who work in our public schools, everyone from the bus driver, custodian, and classroom teacher to the nutrition services worker, teacher aide, administrative staff, and countless others who are making a difference in ensuring every student receives a quality education.
Thank you. Ms. Richardson, or is there anybody from the public who would like to comment on the resolution? Thank you. Anyone from the board? Ms. Barnett?
Just want to say that I am proud to support this and thank you to all of our educators and everyone out there.
Ms. Hardy?
I echo that. As a former district educator, I know just how hard everyone works to make public school in Fairbanks happen. It is no small task, and I am so grateful for everything you give to my own students and also the students of this district.
Mr. Dorn?
And I'm going to echo what has been said and affirm the importance of this resolution because it is incredible what our staff does and many, many different ways and pockets. The time they take with students, just watching the USOG Student Government Conference and watching staff there on the weekend overnight is just indications of how many of our staff do those over and above dedication to students, whether it's preparing a lesson for the next day, working out communication to a parent, newsletter, whatever. And that I think our parent-teacher conference is coming up. They'll just be 2 weeks before this week, American Education Week, but it's a great time to model what we see on regular basis throughout, but concentrated on those 2 days of the communication, the building relationships, the efforts that go into providing a good environment for our students. And again, this is a great opportunity to acknowledge for National Principals Month. October is that month, and the work that they do along with their staffs, their communities, to make American education the shining star that it is actually around the world. And I've been different places, and people constantly come back and say, well, what are you doing in the United States? What are you doing in America? We want to do that. So we're well regarded, and it's because of the dedication of our staff.
Alrighty, I'll just add the power of an educator. I'll just tell you this quick little story. I respect and acknowledge, and a week is not enough to celebrate people who dedicated themselves to teaching and creating a learning environment for our students across this district and across this state. But I'm a mother of 3, grandmother of 9, great-grandmother of 2. I never forget, I think it was Miss Hallshelty at Northwell Elementary. My daughter came home and she said, Mommy, I have to have 7 yellow folders. And I said, well, we have red folders here at the house. I'll just give you 7 red folders. She said, Mommy, no. My teacher said I have to have 7 yellow folders. So what did I do? I went and bought 7 yellow folders so she could take them to school, and she would be happy to do what her teacher had asked her to do. So the power of being able to mold and shape and prepare our students is a very powerful position, and I do give you my gratitude and respect. So the next thing on our agenda is I'm sorry, was there any other additional comments? Because here I go again. I'm doing something really new tonight, so I'm stretching myself. Is there any additional comments from the board? Public? Back to the board? Okay. I just said to the board. To the vote. Ms. Richardson, let's vote.
Mr. Lopez,
Yes.
Colonel Alvarado is giving us a thumbs up. His mic is out. Miss Marati,
Absolutely, yes. Thank you.
Mr. Dorn,
Yes.
Mrs. Burnett,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Hardy,
Yes.
Mrs. Sanderson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried.
All right, thank you. And the next is our policy, policy 1061, student welfare, and this is our first reading of this motion.
Move to approve first reading, public hearing, and advancement to a second reading, and a vote of policy 1061, student welfare, school wellness.
Second.
And you guys, are you doing that? Go ahead, Susan.
So just a reminder, this came before the board as a report, and this policy is bringing us in compliance based on an audit that we received last school year. And so Amy Rouse is here for additional questions from the board if you have any.
Okay, Ms. Burnett?
Through the chair, my question would be, so with our current switch with what we're doing with AASB, how does this policy work into that? And if, really what I want to make sure of is that the policy that we're switching to with AASB pretty much is this, as I don't want there to be like any kind of gray area. So will this transfer over, or how does that work?
Yeah, I'd be happy to answer that for you. So we are going to find ourselves potentially in this place where we're working between what the board did in last meeting's work sessions versus policy that's coming before the board. Any adopted policy, we would make sure as the board continues to review individual chapters that would be put in there for review at that point in time. This is in I would say alignment with AASB's model policies, especially since this is a requirement from the federal government to have in place.
All right, thank you. That's your question? Okay. Any additional? Okay. Anyone from the public wishing to testify or on the on this policy? Seeing none, we'll go back to the board. Okay. And Ms. Richardson, if you call for the vote. Even on the first reading? Yeah.
Colonel Alvarado, it's a yes. Mr. Lopez,
Yes.
Mrs. Hardy,
Yes.
Miss Marati,
Yes.
Mr. Doran,
Yes.
Mrs. Burnett,
Yes.
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Sanderson.
Yes.
Motion carried.
All right, thank you. Next item on our agenda is the selection of the chief negotiator for the commencement of the Fairbanks Principals Association. May I have a motion, please?
Move to name Ivory McDaniel Ilgenfritz, Executive Director of Human Resources, as Chief Negotiator for the school board in its negotiations with the Fairbanks Principals Association.
Second.
Are there any questions or comments or anybody from the public? Back to the board? Okay. Could we have the vote, Ms. Richardson?
Mr. Lopez,
Yes.
Colonel Alvarado, I'll come back to Colonel Alvarado. Oh, he has holding up a sign yes. Okay, thank you.
Jeez, poor
Mrs. Smith,
Yes.
Mrs. Hardy,
Yes.
Miss Marati,
Yes.
Mr. Doran,
Yes.
Mrs. Burnett,
Yes.
Mrs. Sanderson.
Yes.
Thank you. Motion carried.
Great, thank you. The next, we're under information and reports. First up is our school climate survey report. Dr. Elisat, Senior Research Analyst, will provide an overview of the 2023 School Climate Survey. Welcome, Dr. Ott, and it looks like Ms. Brianna Gray is going to join you.
Thank you for the opportunity to present to the board the school climate survey results. My name is Ellis Ott. I am the Senior Research Analyst for the school district, and with me is,
Brianna Gray, I'm the Executive Director of Student Support Services.
thank you. So to start off, we're addressing the components of the strategic plan, namely the providing a safe learning environment for students and the goal of increasing social emotional well-being for all students. We're attempting to measure those efforts. And the climate surveys are about.
Yeah, so climate surveys can allow us to better understand the perceptions of students, staff, and parents in our district, giving us the ability to monitor progress and make data-informed decisions, and also the ability to adapt and shift needs related.
Ms. Gray, could you use your mic for us?
Oh, can you not hear me?
There you go.
All right, that's better. All right, so climate surveys can allow us to better understand the perceptions of students, staff, and parents in our district, giving us the ability to monitor progress and make data-informed decisions, and also the ability to adapt and shift to the needs related to school climate.
So I'll do a brief overview of how these were developed. They were developed by the American Institute of Research for the U.S. Department of Education. They're highly reliable, nationally validated surveys. We've been administering them for the last 7 years, including last year, the spring of 2023. It's a suite of surveys for students in grades 5 through 12, all parents, all staff across the district. In general, it takes about 10 to 20 minutes to complete the survey, and most of the survey is a statement, a positive statement about a school, and ask the respondent to indicate their level of agreement with that statement, ranging from strongly disagree to strongly agree. Okay, and so we have these series of items that someone completes. It could be 40 for parents and a couple more for staff. And there's a set of them, they're in particular domains and topics, getting a general sense of how the students and staff feel about these areas. So the 3 domains are engagement, safety, and environment. And you can read through the various topics within those. So for example, within safety is the topic of bullying and cyberbullying. The engagement domain is about strong relationships between students, teachers, staff, families, and schools. And an example item in there is the statement, staff do a good job helping parents to support their children's learning at home. And that's for the staff survey. The safety domain is pretty self-explanatory. It's about emotional and physical safety so that students can be free to focus on learning. So since I mentioned students, the item for students says, I feel safe going to and from this school. The environment domain includes instructional and the physical environment, such as the student's comfort level in the building, and discipline policy. And the example parent item is my child's teachers make themselves available to me. Okay, and we'll meet to Brianna on current efforts.
Yeah, so there are many different ways that we already support school climate, and some of our current efforts include a variety of programming and supports, including Bright Futures. Bright Futures is a framework that we utilize to work with our community partners to supply families and students to meet the various needs. So for example, winter gear, if they need assistance with food boxes, we've helped with finding firewood. So reducing some of the barriers that they are seeing when they're trying to be successful in our schools. Staffing, so there are a lot of our programs are grant funded, and we have been working to make sure that we're intentional in our staffing. So 2 examples of that are our student discipline and what's the title? Student discipline and policy specialist and improvement coordinator, school improvement coordinator. And these 2 positions work directly with our policy. They also work with our TSI, CSI schools, and that's really important to focus on. Many of our schools are required to create plans, so our title schools are required to have family engagement plans. Our TSI, CSI schools are required to have improvement plans, and all of our schools are working with our superintendents to make sure that we are working on our action plans that focus on literacy, attendance, and climate and culture. Professional development, many of our schools engage in professional development. One that we worked on recently was a family engagement professional development where title schools and support staff learned about specific ways we can incorporate a tiered approach to our family engagement plans. We've worked with all of you and many different executive directors on updating our policies and procedures. And we've worked together as a leadership team to ensure we are providing multiple channels of consistent communication and engagement to families and staff. One of the things I like to talk about is some of our family engagement events that we've done with schools. Last year, we worked with Weller to do a Fiddle Fest. We had the Alaska Room come to Weller and provide a week-long professional development with educators in the school, and we worked with our students so they feel comfortable in doing cultural enrichment activities and connecting families to schools while our programs are not with them. And then at the end of it, we had a Fiddle Fest, and that was amazing to see because a lot of our families in our community are incredible resources. They work at our university, they work at our community organizations that we work with, and it was amazing to see the positive feedback and connection that brought to our schools.
Thank you, Brianna. So these are a couple example screens, but I am going to go take us straight to the data dashboard. I'm going to walk mostly the public and reminder for board members of how to get there. So at the school district website, there's a little banner here with some tabs in there, and there's one tab that has a person pointing at a graph, and that's the data dashboards. I'm going to go click on that. And there'll be a couple different ones to pick from. There's a live class size dashboard. There's a link to the American Community Survey dashboard developed by the National Center for Education Statistics, but we will focus on the district's data dashboard. Okay. So for the benefit of time, I'm going to focus on the School Climate for Students display. Okay, so this is what I was talking about, where we have results for the last 7 years in the domains of engagement, safety, and environment. And the results that are being presented are positive rates. That's the proportion of students that indicated a positive perception in those particular domains or very positive. And what that basically amounts to is, in general, for let's say it's the positive indication, in general they agree with a positive statement, or if they're very positive about that domain, it means in general they strongly agree with a positive statement in that particular domain. And if you're curious about the items that map to each domain, you can review that in this dashboard. There's also some comparison groups that you can do. So if you want to look at results by grade level, you can click on this and review that, and you probably want to shrink it down so it's easier to read by potentially filtering. And filtering is where I can pick specific things, like I could pull out grade 3, I could focus on specific grades. So that's a little playground to play with later, and just showing you quickly the kinds of things that you can do with this dashboard. The second tab is the question asking the student to grade their school. Give your school an A, B, C, D, or F. And these provide the proportions of the different grades students gave their school in the various school years. We also have response rates, how many students participate in the survey. Last year, about 50% of students participated. And then we go into a little more detail. As I was saying before, there's the topics within the domain, so you can look at those as well. And the specific level of detail for every single question within the survey. So if you want to know all the items in the survey, they are here in the dashboard. So for example, this one says boys and girls are treated equally well, and that's an engagement question. And you can pare it down if you want. You can click over here on a topic and it can focus on that particular topic and the items within that. Okay. So we're going to go back to the presentation and provide some general overview results. Response rates were down a little bit in 2023 versus 2022 for students and parents. An increase in the response rate for staff. In general, the majority of students and staff have a positive or very positive view of their school in all domains and topics. The majority of students and staff and parents grade their school with an A or a B. I also looked at something that's analogous to achievement gaps. I call them perception gaps. Is there a difference in the positive rates by demographic groups? And I looked at how many have at least a small effect size or larger. And I only found a few. One was students with disabilities in 2 domains, and they actually had a higher positive rate than students without disabilities in the domains of safety and environment. And English language learners had a higher positive rate in environment, and that one was a medium effect size. And small is about, give or take, a difference of 5 percentage points. And a medium is about 10 percentage points. So if you have 70% positive and 80% positive, that difference is like a medium effect size. And the last result to comment on is the decrease, a small decrease in positive rate in 22-23 versus 21-22, particularly for students in the domain of safety. And one thing that I forgot to mention as I was pointing out the dashboard, what you'll notice that there's a little star next to 2020, 2021. And there's a little comment that says, just be cautious about how you interpret this year, because in that year, in the fall, we had remote learning for all students. And in the spring, we had in-person optional, and it was about 50-50, give or take, the proportion of students that were in-person versus remote. And ultimately, the way that we're responding to items is going to be different when we've been in remote learning for a long period of time. So an example item might be, I feel safe going to and from school. The very nature of that question is about physically going to and from school. So I express caution about interpreting those results. Okay, climate looking forward.
All right. So it takes time to improve school climate with commitment from a variety of individuals in a variety of roles. Our leadership team has been intentional in ensuring we are working with all of our schools, students, and families to connect school climate data to other school systems, practices, and policies to promote alignment and efficiency. We are being realistic about our capacity while setting deadlines and expectations for support and efforts towards our school climate and strategic goals. And we will continue sharing information about our school climate improvement process to our families and staff throughout the year. Our Student Support Services Department is currently working with Hanover Research to develop a social and emotional learning framework that supports a range of student needs and is aligned with district values to include restorative practices. We are reviewing how current district MTSS practices and structures can be integrated into the development of this framework to ensure that there is district alignment.
Okay, so this is the resources. So there's a, I can't remember their full organization name, but they're the Safe Supportive Learning. They're an organization that worked with the American Institute of Research to kind of develop these domains and topics, because that's where their expertise is. So there's a website to go to if a school's saying, I want to improve school climate, what are some things I can do? There's a package there that can talk about how you review your data, how you might write an action plan, and things that you can do to improve school climate. And there's further resources referenced here.
Yeah, so these are our district resources. Some of these I spoke about previously. So if you want to look at some of our family engagement plans or improvement plans, you can go to our website.
And that concludes our presentation and open for questions.
Okay. Any questions from the board? Mr. Dorn?
Thank you. I have three, so you can pace me as you want. But I'll start off with thank you very much for both of you for the presentation and the wealth of information that over a span of years, which is really, really important. I was struck by the climate, what climate surveys can do, and item 2 is monitor progress and make data-informed decisions. So those are my questions. In terms of progress over the, what is it, 9 years?
7 years. Yeah.
7 years.
Mhm.
Are there any highlights of progress that you've noted that we have made in terms of school climate?
I know that sometimes I'll look at different schools and whatnot. I remember seeing that, for example, a career education center had quite high school climate survey results, and in some instances, some schools talked about efforts that they made. They'd look at their results and say, we're going to make an effort with school climate, both for responses and improving results. And I did see increases for those specific schools. I'll see if there's more comments from others.
Ms. Marotti?
Thank you for this information and for the background, and looking forward on what we can do. I just want to reiterate, using this information, the importance of adding this to our superintendent's priorities, goals, and plan for the next year, and as long as we need to. Specifically, the only way I can describe it is the catastrophic drop in positive responses for safety. That breaks my heart, and I really hope that we can make some positive change. Thanks.
Ms. Hardy?
I have two. So my first was, Ms. Gray, you mentioned Hanover Research in developing a social emotional learning framework. I was just curious in learning more about that, or
Yes, so we are in the initial phases. We are currently doing an assessment. There will be a survey that will be going out to our staff in November to look at our organizational structure and how our SELP program is functioning, the staff that we have into it. So we're still in the assessment process. And as we continue to move forward, I wouldn't mind coming and doing a report on that.
Dr. Marner, you have a comment?
I do, just on that. So we just met with Hanover Research today, and we got some initial research findings, and I'll be sharing that with the board and this week's board update, and then lots more to come on the social emotional front in terms of them helping us reestablish a framework and a really good way to go forward in the district. In terms of goals, that's definitely one of my goals this year. I knew culture and climate coming out of the pandemic was struggling within our school district and school districts throughout the country. Schools have looked at their culture and climate survey results and the data and have built action plans around that. And so we're hoping to see some positive growth within the next year based on the data that they looked at and addressing individual needs at the school level.
Okay. Did you have a follow? Mr. Dorn?
Another comment to come in mind, that given what Board Member Doran had asked, things to celebrate is I'm currently working on a new format for probably most of the dashboards when I first started school climate. It's not ready yet. It's really in draft form. And one of them will be a longitudinal graph, a line. And when I do that, I'll be able to overlay the national benchmark. So American Institute of Research collected data on school districts and states across the nation that had developed this. And I have positive rates for that national benchmark, and I can overlay it. And what I notice is that we are consistently above that over all 7 administrations of the assessment for students, or the survey.
Okay, Ms. Marati?
Thank you for that information. I do know that AASB also does a climate survey that we don't participate in. Can you overlay their measurements next to ours?
I don't, unfortunately, it wouldn't be, they're not comparable. So sort of be like apples and oranges, trying to put them together on a graph. And we certainly considered it before, but the first thing that I get concerned about is if we participated, it would come at a cost to do that. And currently, we don't have a cost for this current survey. I can take the code to do it, and it just runs through essentially my work that I do for the district.
Ms. Hardy?
First, I want to thank you for coming. The first time I heard you present this to the board, I was actually sitting out in the audience and I didn't know we had a district data dashboard, and I've really enjoyed learning all of that, and I'm so appreciative of the work you do. And at that same meeting, you said one of the concerning things were African American students feeling unsafe in our schools, and I was wondering if there is any update on if that has improved over the last year, if where we are on that.
Absolutely. So again, I reviewed that, and the presentation last year was about the domains and topics results for African American students, and that demographic group had the lowest positive rate, and that is not the case in 22-23. And I also looked at the perception gaps. They actually had a higher positive rate within engagement, a negligible result for environment, and really not even a small effect size for safety.
So Dr. Ott, as we move into our budget cycle, we often hear how these numbers are used against us. They have really not clarity. They don't have clue. I'm saying they in this general term. How can you help the board utilize our dash information to showcase the improvements that our students across the district have made, and how I know we can access it, but making that a tool that when we go out and we're advocating, there will be a joint session here soon between the Rural Assembly and ourselves, and to make this information pliable so that they understand the dynamic of what these numbers mean to us as a district, instead of some general thing that they normally throw out.
I appreciate the question. It reminds me of Board Member April Smith saying, I'm interested in talking points, right? And I've certainly spoken with the superintendent about my ideas, and certainly I'll get direction from our administration and our superintendent around certainly ideas that I have to help support the board when it comes to, what is the data that you can provide, and we're getting more general here. And I certainly thought very thoroughly about it, about how to support our efforts for advocacy for education in the state and certainly in our district. Like for example, when we hear results about how our state is doing, I'd say something as simple as, well, how does our district do, right? So we'll hear talk about how our students across the state are doing on something like the National Assessment of Educational Progress, and I'll say, you don't have results for Fairbanks in regards to that assessment. And we do have that in other assessments, like the measure of academic progress that Dr. Minard has mentioned. So I absolutely would love to continue working and hoping that I can try and support the board the best that I can with working with the administration to help you with that.
And thank you for that. I know our board is extremely interested in it, so that when we advocate, we can come from a place of power and an advantage to, again, inform and educate them as to what our students in this district is doing. Thank you. Ms. Gray, did you have comment? I'm sorry.
Yes, I just wanted to touch on that. So one of the things that I've been really excited about these last few months is just how we are moving in a more unified way and we're communicating with one another. When I was first hired onto this position, I don't feel like that was necessarily happening, and I'm really thankful that Dr. Luke Meinhardt has been working with us and our teams and holding us accountable. So we're having these conversations at the executive director level, we're having them at our program level, we're having them with the schools, and Dr. Ah is also working with us. So I'm excited to see that we will be able to provide more information to you, more talking points that is more unified and streamlined. So I just wanted to make that point.
Thank you. Are there any additional comments from the board? Okay, Mr. Dorn?
And I'll come to my other two questions, combining them. But listening to Dr. Meinert's comments and both Dr. Ott and Ms. Gray, it may be in process. So what I'm very interested in is, as I mentioned, the progress that we can note, but also the areas of greatest need that show up on it, delineation of that, and then those that could become targeted areas for improvement. I'm not sure whether you've had a chance to go through the data to that depth to identify them. The general pieces are good, and to kind of get a sense of the response rates, et cetera, but to really, I'm trying to figure, how do we get that data that helps us, guide us as we do budget and further support to the district. So that might be something that you had in mind, Dr. Miner, when you were talking about trying to talk with others, pull that together. And through the chair, perhaps something that would be a point of information that where we could really see those highlighted spots, progress, what our greatest needs are, and then the targeted areas for improvement. And I'd underscore that with, I'm very pleased to hear that, you know, as the schools are looking at that, and having been a principal who have used various, not this specific climate survey, but other information that helped us to target areas for our school community. At the school level was good, but as a district where we are, that would be, I think, helpful information. So a request through the chair.
All right, thank you. If you make a note of that, Ms. Richardson, and then Dr. Marnett.
Yeah, so I've done some of that analysis for our initial needs for each student, staff, and parents. I could share that with you this evening, or I could put it in this week's board update this evening. Okay. So as we're looking at students and safety, some of the top 3 areas, specifically, if you look at the questions that were asked, one of the highest indicators that we need to work on is the question around, at the school, students talk about the importance of understanding their own feelings and the feelings of others. Another one, students often spread mean rumors or lies about others at school on the internet. And students at the schools are teased or picked on about their real or perceived sexual orientation. So all 3 areas of focus for us as a district. Under environment for students, students at the school stop and think before doing anything before they get angry. Additionally, students at the school try to work out their disagreements with other students by talking to them. So a couple of ideas around those 2 categories. I know in the past at the secondary level, there was conflict resolution teams, potentially bringing those back to ensure that students are having conversations about their feelings and working through different scenarios. Also, restorative practices when we're looking at our disciplinary issues can bring about greater feelings of safety for all of our students. Under engagement, this one was actually kind of surprising to me. Both dealt with regularly attending events and extracurricular activities. Many students strongly disagreed with that, and we know extracurricular activities are an important way to engage students and keep them connected to the school environment. So we've got some work to do there, and that was an outlier that I didn't expect. Under staff, for environment, the school effectively handles student discipline and behavior patterns. Students come to my class prepared with supplies and books. So a couple of areas to focus on there. Engagement, administrators involve staff in decision-making, and talking about trust among staff members. And so I will say that I think our principals have done an excellent job this year working with their staff in a distributed shared decision-making model. And that's something that's really important to me as a leader, that we are involving stakeholders in the decisions that we're making. So that'll continue to be a point of emphasis for us going forward. And then building trust. This says trust between staff members, but I think trust, as a community, as an educational community, and trust with our community is something that's important. Parents. I would like to say that 90% of parents gave the district a C or higher, and that was a little over 1,100 students or 1,100 parents that rated that. Only 46 parents gave us an F, so I think that's important to note. Under engagement for parents, the school has quality programs for my child's talents, gifts, or special needs. That's an area that we need to improve upon. The school helps me figure out what social and emotional skills my child needs to develop. And I think that goes hand in hand with the work that we're doing with Hanover. And we'll hopefully be able to articulate that better to parents as we're identifying those things in school. Under safety, not a surprise here, vaping is the #1 issue for parents, and something that we continue to see as an issue, and that we'll try to do our best to address as a school community, specifically at secondary schools. And then environment, a couple areas of improvement that are needed in the parents' eyes are students having enough healthy food options available for them, and then celebrating students doing things well. And I'll say our principals have been focusing on ways that they can do that this year, catching kids doing great things. Many of our schools are going to do positive postcards with families, sending postcards out and letting them know the great things that their students are doing. So that would be my brief analysis on the climate survey. Haven't had this data super long, but that gives you an overview of some of the things that we're looking at as a district.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Really appreciate that.
Ms. Moretti.
Thank you for that. I'd like to follow up. You mentioned that students, specifically students are being teased or bullied about their orientation. Are there any ideas or anything that we can look forward to that might address this?
I know we started through the chair.
Oh, go right ahead.
We started. Sorry, I just jumped right in there.
I was focused on our question. I was like, what is she saying? What? Go ahead, Dr. Moore.
I had some conversations with West Valley's GSA last year about better ways to engage students and make them feel safe. I know they provided a presentation to students during their extension classes. And so just the other day, Ms. Gillum and I were discussing having another conversation with West Valley and their GSA to have ideas about not only providing that information to their school, but if they would be interested in providing that information to other schools throughout the district as an initial starting point. And then obviously listening to that student group, I think they have some powerful voices and how we could potentially make them feel more safe in school.
Okay. All right. Dr. Art, did you have anything else for us? Okay. We appreciate your presentation and thank you. Look forward to you working with the board for our talking points. Next on our agenda is the report on Alaska Reads and Elementary MTSS plan. Okay, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, Chan, Mr. Bean, and Assistant Superintendent Kate LaPlante will provide information and an update on the Alaska Reads Act and Elementary MTSS plan.
Thank you so much. We're just taking a moment to get our presentation up on display so everybody can see it. But while that's coming, I'd just like to thank you for inviting Shane and I back to provide an update on our district's progress with our literacy focus, our elementary MTSS reading plan, and the implementation of the Alaska Reads Act. We appreciate every opportunity to highlight the work of our educators and the progress of our students. I always like to include a reference to our work and how it ties back into the district's mission and the board's mission. So considering that reading is an essential skill, we are focusing on providing lots of opportunities for students to get instruction that they need to become successful readers.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for having us. So basically what we're looking at is what has happened since we were here last back on August 15th. So we have some updates on lots of things that we've been doing in this area. First off, our district-wide MTSS plan was approved by deed. That is something that is has to be done by every district in the state. Ours was sent in, and then they said that it was fine. And essentially, that was the same, not exactly the same information, but you guys got back on back a few months ago. You guys actually got a little bit more detail than they asked for, but it was essentially the same kind of information. We also gave our fall benchmark assessments. There are a couple of different things that either have been completed or we're in the midst of right now. This is the first of 3 different testing windows. We have them here in the fall, and then in winter, and then again in the spring. We gave M-Class, that is completed. That is required by the AK Reads Act. We are finished with that. And I wanted to put that visual up there so you can see the different assessments that we gave for this window. In the red, that's the iReady diagnostic. In the green, that's the map, and you can see what grade levels that goes along with also. In the blue, that's M-Class, and in the purple, that's the kindergarten profile. The kindergarten profile is not actually an assessment. It's more of a teacher observation, but it is something that is required by the state, and we do that every year. And we're probably about 2/3 of the way through that window, and that should be closing up here in the next few weeks. That is something that is required, that all K teachers do these observations on their students, and then we send that information into DEED.
So the next thing is what to do with all this data that we get from our assessments. And I just want to thank and acknowledge that because of the approval of the board last spring and the IDEA team that Shane works with so closely, and the recognition that we were going to need some time to look at this data, especially the new data, we had set aside an early out and a professional development day specifically for data. So we called that our data day, and we consider it a huge success. Teachers across our elementary all the way through high schools took that time to look at their student learning data. At the elementary level, the kindergarten through 3rd grades, they looked at the they created the reading achievement plans, which we'll talk about here soon. They finalized their walk to intervention programs, figuring out which students needed to be grouped appropriately. So there was a ton of work that happened on those 2 days. And again, we thank our educators. And I heard from multiple principals and teachers that that was time well needed and well spent.
Yes, I have heard the same thing. That was those were great days for us to look at data. So what data did we look at? So we're going to look at 3 different sets of data while we're here this evening. And I want to emphasize that while we have 3 different assessments, every assessment has a different purpose. So I think it's really easy for the public or other folks to say, oh, we are really over testing our kids. And there will be a time that some places might overtest their kids. For our purposes, every one of these that we give has a different purpose, and they're all important purposes. So I want to say that, and we'll talk about that as we go through each one of them. So the first one here, M-Class, that is given to kindergarten, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd graders. And these are the results that we can see here. A few things that I want to kind of point out here is, first off, you can see the colors across the top, well below at benchmark, and then above benchmark. Then we see how those colors coordinate. That'll be important because later on, pretty much no matter what assessment we give, there are 4 levels, and the wording is different, but the meaning is kind of the same. And we can see that kindergarten has a lot of red. I want to make sure that we understand why that might be the case. I don't believe that it's a matter of we have struggling kindergartners. I think we have a lot of kindergartners who haven't had instruction yet. So I think that that's something to kind of keep in mind. And then in a few slides from now, we'll see how DEED reacted to that, because we were not the only ones who were saying that it was kind of unfair that we throw this test to kindergartners in their first 3 weeks that they've ever been in school and then think that they're going to be okay. So I wouldn't worry too much about that high number, because I'm very confident that that red will shrink quite a bit in the winter benchmark and then in the spring benchmark also. But you can see how those kind of lay out. I do want to talk about M-Class, that test itself for a moment. Just as a reminder, that is the 8th version of DIBELS. DIBELS is something that this district used for a long time. So this isn't something new, totally new for us. We used DIBELS a long time ago for many years, then moved away from DIBELS and used something called Ames-Web. And now we've moved away from Ames-Web back to DIBELS or M-Class now. And we've done that because the state said, this is the official state screener, and we want you to use that. And I think probably 50 of the districts in the state use this one. And we would have to get special permission to not use this one. And we would have to pay for it, but this is where we wanted to go with it. I wanted to talk about that. M-Class comes from has been around since 2002 as a nationwide thing. This is a long-standing group. It is nationwide, and it is something that many hundreds, maybe thousands of districts across this nation use this benchmark. So I wanted to kind of put that out there also.
We were just wondering about the header across. You have account, district, well-behaved, benchmark, and, oh, it's different than, okay.
Yes, so on the slide that I gave you, it didn't include that, but I wanted to put it here so you guys could see what those colors stood for, because I didn't include it the first time.
Right,
Thank
thank
you for
you.
noticing that.
Something more than that too. Is there a way that we have access to these results? Like I looked at the district data dashboard and it didn't seem like it was there. So
This is
where
down
do
on
you-
the district.
Okay.
It's
And then
it's
I
not
see
yet.
it says boy. Does this mean this is only males results?
No, beginning of year.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ready to move on? Okay. Oh, I did want to note, and this is kind of what Dr. Ott was saying, is that this helps teachers inform their instruction. This and MAP may be the most important assessments that we give, because it tells our teachers what to do next. AK Star, we get that, like, that gets a lot of press, but the reality is our teachers can't use that data very well, because it's just too big and it comes clearly way too late for them to use anything. This data we get the next day, and teachers can use that information to inform not just their own individual instruction for their individual students, but principals use it to help decide what their walk to intervention program is going to look like and what the groupings will look like. It's very important data. This is the comparison for the fall benchmark that we just finished. And I'm comparing the Fairbanks numbers with the state of Alaska numbers. And you can see that every other one, how that kind of plays out. And we're very close in all of those. And again, you can see same thing across the state. Kindergartners had a real high numbers. It's for that same reason. Here are the MAP benchmark results. This is a chart. I'm going to show you a bar graph to help to kind of keep that how we were moving, but I did want to kind of show you this, is that MAP is for grades 3 through 9, which means keep in mind that M-Class is for grades K through 3. Our third graders took both M-Class and MAP. If, and I know we did, we had some third graders who scored proficient on the M-Class just this last month, they don't have to do M-Class anymore. They're done with that, so that's one less assessment that they have to take. but those are set out by deed, and that's why third grade kids have to take both of those. So you can see that the words to describe are a little different: need support, proficient, advanced, as opposed to what M-Class did, but you can see that they're still divided up into those 4 categories, and the colors are about the same. Here's a bar graph that shows you what that is. So you can see that clearly what it looks like. It was interesting. I know one of the questions that people always ask is, especially, is the MAP data predictive of what happens with the spring assessment? And I would say it's impossible to tell, in part because we've only had one version of the spring of this AK Reads that we have any data for. But I do want to make a note of this, and I didn't develop this until late in the day, so I don't have a slide for it, but this is interesting. If we look at the 4th graders who are, the 5th graders who would be well below or in that red, and then add that to the 29, if we take this year's 5th graders in the fall and compare it to last year's 4th graders, same kids, in the spring, the numbers are about 2% different. Same thing, we take this year's 6th graders and compare them to last year's 5th graders, same kids, the numbers are only about 2% difference. And I think that 2% could easily be pointed back to summer slide, because kids are generally going to have higher scores, you would think, at the end of the year, because they've had all that instruction, then they have 2.5 months off, and they're going to lose some of that instruction. So I believe that the MAP data is very consistent, and we can see that throughout these years. Again, MAP, just like M-Class, is great for informing our instruction and helping our principals and our teachers figure out what their walk-to intervention groups will look like. The third assessment that we're looking at here is called iReady. iReady is our math program, but it's also our reading assessment that we use. The iReady gives each student a specific pathway, because it's an online tool. So a student sits online, they do their iReady assessment, and then immediately it creates for them a pathway where they can work on their own pace to move forward. So while teachers are teaching their classes, this can be used at home, this could be used in class, this can be used lots of places for kids to move on their own path. It is not mandatory, this is optional, but if you look at the numbers across the bottom where it says students assessed, you can see that it's pretty popular, despite the fact that our teachers are required to give the M-Class and/or the MAP. Many of them still find this data and the tool valuable enough that they give this also. And this shows K-5, this one shows 6, 7, 8. So it's very popular right now, because it does give those students that pathway for them to work on.
I'd like to just take a moment and point out on that slide, that the numbers for this year, the 23-24, are significantly higher than the numbers of assessments given in middle school prior to that. And I just think that that really highlights that our reading focus is district-wide, and that our middle school teachers are just as committed to improving reading scores for our middle school students as our elementary schools. When I saw that, I was really pleased and impressed, and it just spoke to me of the dedication of our middle school teachers.
Yeah, I can't thank our teachers enough for the work they've done. When I've talked to a couple of folks, I've talked to Kate about this a couple of times. I don't know how I used to spend my time, because I'm telling you, this AK Reads Act is like 90% of my day, every single day. And I'm sure the teachers kind of feel the same way. We've asked them, the state have asked them, and we're trying to support them into doing so many things that are different or new or used to be old and now they're back again. And they are doing a really, really tremendous job. I could not be happier with what our teachers are doing, that they have bought into literacy is important and we need to move forward, and I am super excited about that.
So the Reading Achievement Plan, which you've heard of and which teachers had an opportunity to work on during their data day, we as a district were able to get that put into Power School, thanks to Colin Lasley,
I think it's
Lasley, who is one of our system programmers, and he worked with the IDEA team, and they looked at the state requirements for what a reading achievement plan should have, and he built that into Power School for teachers to have easy access to it. And it actually, I mean, it's an amazing system. As soon as they did the assessments and it told us if the student was, below proficient or far below or above, it indicated that they needed a route plan and created kind of a pathway for the teacher to just click right on it and do it very seamlessly. So on the data day that we had set aside, principals kind of had a plan with teachers' teams to kind of do a couple wrap together, kind of the we do model. And so they did maybe one as a whole staff and then maybe a couple as groups. And then they had more time to work on them individually, although many teachers I hear continue to do them in groups and just support each other. The time frame I understand for doing a wrap went down from maybe 15 or 20 minutes the first couple times you do it to maybe 7 to 10 minutes or perhaps even less depending how efficient a teacher got at it. And by doing that, we had 1,329 wrap plans created for our students 1st through 3rd grade. And although the state made it optional, we still had 456 wrap plans created for our kindergarten students. Again, it's a useful tool. And I'm also very pleased that while this lives in Power School, we wanted something that could be printed out and given to parents at parent-teacher conferences or throughout the year. So it also translates into a nice kind of one-page document. And when parents go to parent-teacher conferences, like I'll talk about here soon, they'll be able to see that as well.
I would just add in is that when we first got this document from DEED, it was 10 pages long, and teachers would have to fill out so much information, so many blanks. And Colin and the team did an amazing job reducing it down to this. I've spoken to, I will not name which district, but one of the big 5 districts, and they don't have this, and they're trying to do it on Google Docs. And that was just got to be so aggravating. I mean, this is just so much better. So thanks to that group.
Yeah, we were able to create drop-down menus and autofill and really simplify the process. When the students are identified as being either far below or below proficient and they require a wrap plan, we need to inform the parents of that. And so this is a sample of a letter that either the schools, just used directly this format, or they could modify it and personalize it a little bit for their school. But it basically informs the parent that we want to work with their child, help them improve in reading, what their score was, and that they are going to have an opportunity to meet with the teacher and get more information about the reading plan at the school.
And I just want to add that in an effort to make sure that we are communicating with all of our families, some folks in my department, ELL, are translating these for us. So far, we have Spanish, Russian, Korean, and Chinese for families who do not read or speak English, so we can send those out to you. And I just want to put that because I'm super proud of this, that we have some folks in that department who, because I didn't ask for this, they just said, hey, we can go do this thing. And the fact that we have people who could translate all these languages, and we have more coming, so it's super cool. So the changes from DEED, Kate just mentioned one. So originally, the rule is that starting with the fall benchmark window, K through 3 students who show as below proficient or far below should have a RAP plan. The update from DEED is essentially that kindergartners don't need a RAP plan for fall because of what I just said before. It's really not fair to judge them and say that they're struggling when they're not struggling. They just haven't had any instruction yet. So we didn't have to do it, but nonetheless, we had 450, 500 created, and the state is saying that only students identified as far below will need a RAP. However, in our district, after talking to principals, they have pretty much come back and said, you know what, creating that RAP plan is not the biggest lift of this whole thing, and it gives us great information and a great plan. So we in our district are maintaining with the below and far below like we had before. And, support for schools. There are lots of ways that we're trying to support schools. We created AK Reads Family PowerPoint. Sometimes I go out and give that PowerPoint. Sometimes principals take the PowerPoint, tweak it for their needs, and then they're the ones who put it out there. Essentially what we do is we say, what does the school year look like for a second grader who has to take M class? And what if they have a RAP plan? And what about their friends who are in third grade? What do they have to do? And then what about the progress monitoring? So we just say, what does the year look like for a second grader? And we kind of walk the families through that. And that's been out there. We've supported schools by going out and doing that. We have lots of videos out there for schools to use or for the community to look at, which is on our website.
As I mentioned a little bit before this, October 30th and 31st are parent-teacher conference days. It's an opportunity for parents and guardians to meet personally with their child's teacher. And at that time, if their student has a RAP plan, they will have an opportunity to sit down with the teacher and review that, make input on that, ask questions about how the Alaska Reads Act and the MTSS program are working at that school. And that's when the RAP plan will be finalized, is when the parents have an opportunity to sit down with the teacher. If they're not able to have a sit down at the conference time, they can certainly reach out to the teacher ahead of time. They can do it over the phone. So there's many opportunities and ways for parents to be involved in that. And then we're committed, it's in the plan, but it's the right thing to do anyway, to informing parents over the course of the year how their student is progressing.
And then speaking of parents, there are lots of tools that parents can use at home to help their students. We have SmartyAns, iReady that I mentioned earlier. We can use that. We have Pebble Go, and our new K-5 core reading program. There are some online components to that called Waggle. We can see that there. And we also have access to SLED, which is a statewide program. And I don't know, quite honestly, that we've done a great job promoting that. I think probably the vast majority of parents or even teachers don't realize that we have access to it, but we do, and we need to kind of get this word out. There's lots of things in that SLED that parents and teachers can use, but specifically parents can go in and they just click on it and it's there, and kids can go in and kind of practice some things, including live homework help all of the time. So it's always there. That's all we have, and we're ready to take questions.
Can we have Ms. Burnett? Ms. Smith?
Thank you, Ms. LaPlante and Mr. Beam, for your presentation. First, you guys both know I've asked multiple times about the older kids in middle school and things like that. So I as well appreciate and am relieved and very grateful that our teachers are taking that extra step and actually worried about that too. So that's amazing. And I'm glad that all students are getting a focus on literacy. And then I had a question referring to the RAP plan. Oh, sorry, to the chair. Can I ask one more? Okay. Do kindergartners actually need a RAP plan, like, at all? Now, I understand they're still being assessed and such. I'm just curious what exactly kindergarten reading looks like, and if maybe that RAP plan couldn't be towards the end of the year to focus on first grade, because I know a lot of kindergartners kind of come in and it'll be the first time they've ever done anything.
Has the state come out and changed on anything?
Only, the state has only changed by putting off the fall into the winter. I don't know that I disagree with you. I also think, because I'm going to battle my own thoughts here, is that if we can identify a place where a student who's been in school for 4 months, if they're already kind of starting to show, if we can identify that early on, I think that's a powerful thing for us to do. And if I could, I do want to mention the secondary, since you asked. Not only do they have that iReady reading, we're also working on getting started in some schools in January, some not until next year, an actual reading class for the kids who are really struggling and need that. We have a grant. We are moving forward with that. I think I mentioned that last time. We're getting closer to that every week. And those classes, for the schools who can fit it into their schedules in January, we're going to start it in January. The teachers will have all of the tools they need, online tools, plus textbook, and they'll be getting PD before they start teaching that class, and then while they're teaching the class, one of my folks is going to provide that PD for them. She's an expert in secondary literacy, and then they're going to get a lot of help from her also.
Thank you, Mr. Beam.
Mrs. Smith?
I was just wondering, the RAP that you can upload into PowerSchool, do parents have access to that?
Yes, they do. They can go through through the app, and they can find that on there also.
Ms. Hardy?
I know we received a grant recently for reading instruction at our Title I schools. Will that be used as part of the Walk to Read? And maybe I'm wrong. You're looking at me like,
There are, quite honestly, sorry, the state is hitting literacy hard just like we are. So we have a couple of different grants that aren't even attached to Title I schools. So Title I schools have their Title I money, and then we have some other grants, like the one I just talked about for the secondary, and also we have one because one of the parts of AK Reads is students who show as far below proficient must have outside of school tutoring. So we have a grant for that. We have a 1-year grant. We're in the process of getting that up and running. Some schools are going to try to do that face-to-face after school. Some schools are going to go with video tutoring called varsity tutoring. We're working on that right now. But as we said, I'm going to say this publicly in case some people in Juneau are listening, we have a 1-year grant for $650,000. When you pay for all of this, that sounds like lots of money, but that money goes away quickly. We're paying for people to do the work, or we're paying for this online tutoring. That is going to be gone by the end of the year. And if the law stays the way it is, for us to continue doing that next year will cost us some more money somewhere, unless we do something very out of the box. I'm trying to make that happen.
Mr. Doran?
Thank you very much for this, I'll call it a quarterly update. I think it's really important given the impact that Alaska Reads has on our schools. And I wanted to give some kudos that struck me as you were presenting. I love the fact that the letters to the parents can be modified and personalized for the school community and such. The middle school progress that's being done. And one of my questions had been about the RAP, whether it's user-friendly, and it sounds like it is. Getting there is get people familiar, and I do have to say that I loved the sample. It was very well done, with a good sense of humor. So one of my questions is in terms of the benchmarks, and I'm not sure whether I heard it correctly or whatever, but my question was on the benchmarks for the proficiency levels, who established those? They're based on what, and whose standards set those benchmarks?
Yeah, absolutely. So DIBELS sets those standards. Those standards are compared to other standards, and they've used their data for the last 20 years to come up with those benchmark cutoff numbers. Those numbers were last updated in 2020, and that update came from data from over 1 million students who took M-CLASS in 2019 and that year. So this is something they have lots of data, lots of baseline data for them to make their cutoff points for. It is it's aligned with the high standards for the National Center of Intensive Intervention, which is a national known group. And back to what I was saying before, having these benchmark standards helps us not only figure out how to make next steps in our instruction for the teachers, it helps us on this level decide where to put our resources. We have limited resources. This data helps us figure out, okay, we need to put more money here because we know that is, there's never enough. So this data, whether it's MClass or MAP, helps us make those district level decisions also.
I've got additional questions, or you want to put me in the key?
Anyone, any other member on the board? Go ahead, Mr. Dorn.
Thank you. Could you give some, I don't know, it's not really a correlation, but comparability between MClass, MAP, and iReady? Each of them, as you mentioned, is a little bit different. They measure different things, but what are we seeing, or do you anticipate we might be able to see and look at as we look across three sources of data on each student?
Sure. So a couple things with that. One is that MClass is brand new to us, so it's hard to make to really compare that. The only place where we can do a direct comparison would be third grade, where we have students taking MClass and MAP, and we might be able to see, how well they match up to if a student in the third grade was identified as far below on MClass, were they also considered, far below based on MAP. We haven't done that analysis, but that would be interesting to look at. I think it's important, I find it really important to think of the fact that these assessments are nationally normed, and that means that they're able, the big companies that do this, that have a lot of statisticians, are able to find what is the developmental appropriate level where we can nationally kind of expect a third grader to be, at the beginning of the year, a third grader to be at the middle of the year, and a third grader to be at the end of the year. Of course, assuming instruction is happening, right? And so they're able to see what is, a student that's really excelling doing, and there's a percentage of students there's students that are definitely kind of, we're talking about a bell-shaped curve a little bit, but that's what those national norms are doing. And so they're setting that, but based on, how kids are performing across the country.
I would just like to add that if a student, if a third grade student is below or well below in MClass, odds are they're going to be below or well below in MAP. However, MAP and MClass don't actually test the same thing. So it could be that a student who is really good at decoding and sounding out words would score well on MClass and be proficient, but when they take the MAP, which is more about comprehension, they may struggle a little bit. So reading, it comes in two parts. It's decoding and comprehension. So it's interesting. And until I got a job like this and I started learning more about reading, I thought, because for me, I had a grandma and a mom who read to me every day. And I just thought that if you could read something, if you could sound something out, you understood it. I didn't understand. There were people who could decode and read and sound beautiful while they're reading and have no idea what they just read. That was it. That was just that was shocking to me. And I bet there are other folks like me around who think, oh, as long as they can read out loud, they're fine. And that's not true. So back to MClass might be they read beautifully, it sounds great, and they can say all the words, but they might not be able to comprehend. So there might be a little disconnect between that type of thing. Yeah, I just want to kind of put that out there.
I just have a question before you, Mr. Dorn. So when we went to the Alaska Reads Institute conference, they talked a lot about dyslexia and how that played into some of the below proficiency in scoring and reading ability of our students. How are we assessing that in our district?
Yeah, dyslexia honestly is kind of it's pretty muddy right now, and it's muddy for a couple of reasons. And I'm going to say, but I'm going to ask Kate to kind of jump in and fill in the blanks for me. So, in the state of Alaska, dyslexia is not one of the 15 recognized special ed. I'm not a special ed person, but it's not essentially recognized by this state. Yet, in the Alaska Reads Act, it says that the screener has to be able to show characteristics of dyslexia. So they got M-Class. It does that. And even in M-Class, if you score low enough, it says, oh, this student may have dyslexia. Here are some other assessments that they may be able to take. However, DEED is not kind of caught up to that imbalance where the law says this thing, but the state for decades has not recognized dyslexia as a thing that's any different than a reading deficiency that any other thing. So I do know that last week, excuse me, the special ed directors from across the state got together with DEED. They had their annual conference, and DEED sent out some kind of guidance. I haven't seen that guidance yet, but hopefully that it will help us with that, because it's very muddy. Because I know there are teachers and parents, because I get this email or phone call almost every week. Hey, what about dyslexia? And I don't have a great answer for you because of the way the state has treated dyslexia historically versus how the law states it.
That's just a quick follow-up. So when we advocate about our funding, that could be a different talking point, because this is a mandate that the state is requiring from us. But, this sounds like additional funding may be needed, or testing tools or assessment tools to be able to pull this off. So.
That would always help for sure.
Additional funding, and in this case also some additional clarification. I think one of the things that I found important when I was in a meeting with some dyslexia specialists is I specifically asked, so what is it specifically that helps us know that this student has a reading difficulty versus this student who has specifically dyslexia? And the answer was very vague. And I know that there are experts who really study dyslexia, and I'm sure that there are specific ways that an expert can handle that. But when we then looked at the resources that are suggested to use for dyslexia by, there's a couple national associations, almost all of our currently adopted materials are considered appropriate for helping students with dyslexia. And I think that's one of the most important things that we need to emphasize, is that the question that parents really have is, if my student has dyslexia, or now that we believe that they might, what are we going to do to help them? And we already are using the tools and training our educators to be able to dial into what type of difficulty that student is having and address their need. So I think my analogy is a little bit is that, Tylenol or Advil is good for a lot of things. I don't know how the Tylenol knows to go to my achy elbow on one day and my headache on another day, but it seems to be pretty universally helpful. And so I think that what we have a whole lot of tools in our toolkit, and when we use them for students who have difficulty reading, it seems to be able to be quite effective. So.
And then my last follow-up, and then I'll go to Mr. Doran. So in order to pull off all the assessment and the different support in the classroom, would it say that we would need additional funding for our TAs to be alongside those teachers in the classroom to help support this Alaska Reads Act?
This is mostly an unfunded law at this point. The state DEED recognizes that this is an unfunded law, and what their solution has been is multiple grants. But those grants are going to be, one-time, two-time funding. We don't know how they're going to last. We can't build something sustainable and lasting with the kind of impact that we want with grants. And so, the amount of money that we've received in grants doesn't even cover the needs. We're scraping by, really. So absolutely, advocating for funding is going to be essential.
All right, thank you. Mr. Doran.
Thank you. When we were talking about benchmarks, and you mentioned the word developmental, and that's exactly where I wanted to go. Could you talk a little bit about how the benchmarks reflect sort of academic benchmarks versus developmental benchmarks? And what I'm particularly interested in is, developmentally, there's a range of time when a student might do one thing or another, or a child, whether it's walking, speaking, reading. Could you just talk how the benchmarks balance out the academic and the developmental, if we know?
I don't know that I'm an expert enough to answer that question.
Okay. All right. That's fine. Thank you. If I might, the slide of the map, fall benchmark results, that has the grade levels and the bands. There's no page number, so I can't reference that as bar graph. But what I found particularly interesting, and see if you have any insights at this point on it, is that my experience was often fifth grade was a pivotal year for students who were struggling with reading for, I call it the lights going on. They're starting to make connections. And we saw the benefit of that in sixth grade. And so just looking at the far belows, fifth grade was 26%, sixth grade was 17%, and it's a narrowing all the way through. But then in seventh grade, it all of a sudden jumps to 45. Any insights that you have to that?
My main insight was I had the same question that you have, and we have not gotten into the details to see if this is an ongoing issue, like is it year after year after year that shows that there's this big drop in seventh grade, or is this something that happened just this year? And I don't have that answer yet. We need to get into that long time data.
Okay. And if I might, basically one more.
One more.
I'm going to say thank you for the podcast. I had a chance to see the three of you on that, and with good energy, so appreciate that. We'll look forward in terms of, as we look at this, what's the predictability of scores, if we have any, as we go along from fall to spring to the following fall, a little bit more of that. But my question is a generic one. We've made a perception shift from art of reading to science of reading. Do we know if the benchmarks have reflect that over the years as that has happened, or is it a combination?
I think I might be able to answer that one, Tim. Mr. Dorn, sorry.
That's fine. I'm good. I'm good. Tim is good.
So I would say the science of reading is built into the curriculum, the materials, the instructional practices that we believe are high quality and best instructions. And the art of teaching reading is the practitioner, the teacher. And so does how a student perform reflect both? Absolutely. So obviously, using the highest quality, most research-based and supportive materials in the hands of a really skilled practitioner are going to have the biggest benefit to students. But using quality materials with somebody who is still learning how to become the best teacher they can be is still going to have quality results for students. So does the assessment reflect the art of teaching reading and the science of teaching reading? Yes.
Great. Thank you.
All righty. Seeing no additional questions, thank you for your presentation. And I think our final item we have is our policy 1041-3, student rights and responsibility, rights of search and seizure.
Yeah, come on up, and we did, yep. Oh, you can sit there, that's fine. We did have some updated, sorry, we did have some updated copies of the policy for the board. An inadvertent draft got uploaded to the board packet that was caught at the last minute. So we have some new copies of that policy for the report this evening. And they'll be giving the report from over here. There is a significant difference.
Yeah, we'll all just apologize, and we'll call this to me being a newbie to this process of not going through it before. So the policy that the policy committee is bringing before the board tonight is 1041.3, student rights and responsibilities, rights, and search and seizure. And so this review was initiated. There was some legal advice that we received about not searching student cell phones. So we wanted to, even though that practice was already happening, we wanted to put that explicitly into policy. This policy also hadn't been revised since 1997, so we wanted to review it. I think it's a great example. Our Diana Dillard, who's our policy specialist, did some of the work that the board and the executive team engaged in during the working, those work sessions, that's what they're called, where we took the AASB language, took our current policy language, and found ways to bring them together. It wasn't just a, carte blanche taking of the AASB language, but it was kind of the blending of them together. The AASB language provided some clear case law around decision-making for administrators, specifically with reasonable suspicion, so that information is included in there. And I always think about, I remember how when we were in that work session, they talked about that the policy should give the why, the who, and the what, so we tried to be clear in this policy around that. There also were some minor changes to have more inclusive language in there, using they, them instead of he, she, and then also using administration to just refer to principal or designee. And then I would add, Ms. Smith, if there's anything else that you wanted to include from the policy committee meeting around this one.
We'll go to Ms. Smith and then we'll go to Dr. Moran.
Thank you. I have to admit, when I saw the document that was loaded, I was like, oh, Ms. Gillum didn't really take from that the same thing as me. So I started questioning my everything there. The only concern that the policy committee had was just who is the administration spoken of when it repeatedly said administration will be doing these things. And I think we had a good chat, just that the administration is basically the principal or vice principal and not anyone else. But it wasn't super clear to the parents and community members on there, like, could this be a secretary? Could it be a safety? Who is the administration that's going to be performing these searches? So that was really the main question that they had. Everything else seemed to be a positive conversation that we had there.
Are there additional questions? Go ahead, Mr. Dorn, then Ms. Barnett.
Thank you. I've got two right now. One on the word administration. Is there a reason why we changed that from principal to designee, or went to administration, given the question about who that is and how broad that would be?
I think that our thought was that in a school, it might be a principal, it might be a head teacher, it might be someone else who's designated on that day to stand in. So we just thought administration was a more encompassing term to take into account all those different people. Ms. Smith brought up the point, I may have an administrative secretary, which could be very confusing, I would think. I think when you're in the school, it's clearer, but certainly if there's feedback, that we don't like that change, we can take that into consideration.
I mean, we'd definitely be open to switching it back to principal or designee, if that's consensus with the board.
Ms. Burnett, and then Ms. Marani.
I actually wanted to make a comment about that too. I was on that same thinking. As a parent, I would have a problem with it being a teacher or a secretary, especially when you are involving search and seizure, and if you may need to involve law enforcement with this, a principal, vice principal, I would prefer that language to be very solid, and that's who does this. I could see our whole community having an issue with just the word administration, as I could really truly see parents having an issue with just a teacher being pointed as the search and seizure. It needs to be the principal. That's my preference there. Also, through the chair, if it's okay,
Go right ahead.
the the part where about the student's cell phone. If there is a situation that arises where the cell phone has actually been implicated as being involved in the situation, parent guardian permission, absolutely, but would immediate action be to get a hold of that parent right then and there? Because if the cell, like say there was a student who say took video or picture of another student inappropriately in a restroom, I would consider that being something that we would need immediate knowledge of. And if it was on a cell phone, then we would need immediate permission or access to it, immediate access to it. So how would that work?
So in that instance, and any kind of illegal activity, we would turn that over to the law enforcement agencies to conduct that investigation, and they're really the appropriate party to do those types of investigations.
Mrs. Smith and Ms. Hardy. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's okay. I just wanted to clarify from the committee that we did talk quite extensively about the whole cell phone thing, everything about the cell phone, because there was a lot of chatter about, well, how is the car different from the cell phone? Why are things different? And I don't know if it was totally resolved by saying that the cell phone mostly belongs to the parent. They pay, it's theirs. The kids can't have a contract. They can't own the phone. And so it's basically the parent's item. So the parent has to give the consent. But then, we did digress a little into the car, probably also belongs to the parent, and we search those all the time. So it's just basically that the practice is that we don't search the cell phones until the parent is there to open it, because there's like private things in there, maybe your bank information or personal photos, or that it was like a personal space that didn't necessarily belong to the student, and so we wouldn't search it. So it was a conversation about the phones, but that it would be immediate, and that it was different than the physical immediacy of a car, because a car wouldn't have a picture, or a car wouldn't have a note. It would have a weapon, or something that was urgent. So we did kind of talk that through, and it seemed to be resolved to the stakeholders in the policy committee.
Ms. Marati?
Just a couple things. I'm not sure who to direct my questions to, so I'll just say them out in the air. The first page, so the first 3 paragraphs, instead of I'm comparing it to the AASB policy, and before I forget, if in the future, through the chair, if we could have some way to, since we're moving everything to AASB policies, there's any way, if there's a difference between AASB and what we're policies and what we're being provided, if there's a way we could see the difference, that would be pretty awesome, and it'll be easier for us to determine. I noticed though on the first 3 paragraphs, instead of the word officials, which makes sense, the word authorities are used, but then going forward on the second page, instead of that word, it's administration. So I'm just wondering, for consistency purposes, if they should all be administration, or if they should all be authorities, or if there's a reason for the difference on page 1 versus page 2. And then my other question is, it looks like AASB's policy states that the board urges discretion, good judgment, common sense, and that before searching the student's possessions, the school official or authority or administration will seek but not need receive freely offered consent of the student. And I know, working with students, that's going to be few and far between, but I think it's an important step to ensure that the student has agency at first and the ability to work with administration. So I'm just wondering why that was left out. So the difference in the words and then the reason that paragraph was left out. That paragraph also includes parent notification. And I'm still working my way through the provided policy and I'm trying to find that. So if you could tell me where that's at, that'd be great.
And I'll ask either Ms. Gillum or Diana Dillard if there was any reasoning, maybe for the first question, authorities versus officials.
No, it was a game of really just looking at our policy, trying to stay true to our policy, the changes that we wanted to see internally with our district, and then trying to align it with AASB. And this was, weeks prior to all the work that we did, those 2 days with the board, which really kind of helped conceptualize what this process was going to look like. So at the time, it was just trying to align, and I don't think it would matter at this point. It would be better to just use the same language, and I don't know that it would matter which one to go with.
Okay, I think I had Ms. Harding, then Mr. Dorn. Oh, did you have?
There's just two more for that.
Oh, go ahead.
And then specifics for leaving out
Oh, yeah.
student consent and parent notification.
The parent notification is under search of student. It's in line 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 to 6. It says a reasonable attempt shall be made to notify the student's parent or guardian. So that one is in there. And I don't recall, I'm looking back to Diana, I don't know the paragraph that you're referring to, why it wasn't included in here. It could have just been that when we were comparing the two, there wasn't anything like that in our current policy, and we were looking to kind of match up with what our current policy is. But again, it was right before we started doing all the AASB work, so.
You can have follow-up.
Thank you, Ms. Hardy, for your patience. Thank you for the explanation. I apologize for needing to be pointed out where the notification is. I agree with Ms. Dillard about making it uniform language across the policy, and I don't think there's a difference between the two. And then I would love to suggest an amendment to include that the board urges that, and that's off, it's in ASB Board Policy 514, 5.12, and it's right after there's a bulleted 1 through 5. It's the paragraph right after that. And I just recommend including that in our policy. It really, like I said, I've already said my piece, but I think it would be really important to add.
Ms. Harding.
First statement of support, I also think asking for consent, it doesn't have to be guaranteed, given the situation, is always a good practice and something that we're modeling to students daily anyways. Another question is, could we add definitions, because there is that ambiguity between what is an official, an administrator, what it is. I know lots of other things include here is what we define as that, and that could maybe happen in AR, which was my other question. It looks like the AR was last updated in 1998, and I'm assuming that once this goes through, we'll have an AR that's more robust. And
Dr. Martin? Go, yes, okay. Yeah. Okay, Mr. Dorn.
Okay. I don't want to be repetitious, so just to add, I think, because there was something really important about the board administration, building administration we're referring to, and wherever that falls in clarification as you go about. But I think it does need to cover principal, vice principals, but head teachers, and if there's an acting principal there that day. My own experience says some parts of search and seizure are pretty specific, and you want to be real careful about that. An acting principal, I would expect, in most situations would probably contact one of the assistant superintendents, for guidance on that if the principal could not be otherwise contacted, especially at the elementary where we don't have assistants. I also had a question in terms of halfway down on page 2. And before I forget it, it would be really helpful to have these dated on the bottom, maybe as a draft or proposed or something like that. as well as the slideshows. If it has a date, it kind of helps, but particularly on these. But where it says talks about cell phones, but it says, and under limited conditions as defined in AR. What are we envisioning in terms of under limited conditions for looking at electronic devices?
Yes, that's like if we are looking to find out whose cell phone it is. So we find a missing cell phone, and we're going to try to find some information to determine whose that is so we can get it back to them. I believe that's the language that's in the AR. But or the proposed, what we were thinking in that piece.
Okay. Thank you.
Seeing any additional comments? Mr. Dorn?
Okay, could you, through the chair to the administration, give a kind of a picture? It's come up a little bit tonight. I'm looking for what's the bridge or the linkage as we continue our review of policy and moving to the ASB platform, not necessarily always their policy, but their platform. Are we going to be looking, because the last couple of meetings we've had a report and then moving these forward after adjustments, how do we have a series of policies that we're anticipating? How these came to the fore? And just so we have that, at least I have that broad picture of our policy review as we're going forward with the work we did last week.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. And we've been in a bit of a holding pattern with policy because of the work that the board was going to do and to see how that process played out. I think President Sanderson and I and probably the rest of the board members had maybe kind of some preconceived notions of what it would be, but now we truly know like the direction we're headed. In terms of other policies potentially queued up, there may be a batch of charter school policies that may come to the board prior to large work sessions or reviews of the work that we did with AASB. Part of that is unknown though, because we don't know how quickly AASB will turn around that report for us. They said potentially beginning of November. If that truly is that date, then I would anticipate we could start moving pretty quickly through chapters as a board, depending on the availability of the board to do so. If for some reason that gets pushed back, I would imagine we'll be able to bring charter policies in a batch to the board and start working that through policy committee and then to the board. They're currently with head teachers and charter principals for review. They're going to give us our feedback. Once we incorporate their feedback into the policies, we'll get them out to APCs and start that stakeholder feedback and then bring them to the policy committee once we have that scheduled.
Mrs. Smith and then Mr. Dorn.
Thank you. The policy committee did work on one other policy. I had some suggestions because the issue is, for example, that policy we tabled because there were just too many questions. They needed to do more work. But the policy seems somewhat urgent and relevant. I don't think that particular policy can or should wait until the spring or next year. It was anyway, it seemed like something that the administration needed to deal with more swiftly than that, basically. And that is my suggestion, if I may, since I'm leaving, say that the larger overall policy packages and reviews, I think that it would do well for the board to create, or the administration actually, to create a stakeholder group to assist in going through those large packets, as opposed to the regular policy committee, which could work on more urgent and single particular items. So it just seemed like the policy committee would continue to do the work that they do, look at specific items like the policy that they have in their hands now, and then making an administrative stakeholder group that could help get public input and sort of go through the policies. Because I'm not sure how that stakeholder input is going to get given to those large packets of policies. I think it's too much for the public at once, not having the background, not having the information, but in an administrative policy sort of consulting type of thing that might be really do well for the board to just get that stakeholder feedback on those policy transitions. Sorry.
Were there any additional comments or were you done?
No, that just raised one. If I could ask what that next policy of urgency is, since it's gone to policy committee, I assume it's public.
So I think I'll just say that at the end of our policy work, we had kicked around the idea of doing them in small chunks and then approving the small chunk and then having the one document. So, with the board being reorganized there, the new person will be whoever gets be the chair of the policy committee to continue our work. But the board certainly can decide or say if there's a big work session or something else. But I think we're headed in the right direction to start to work on the policy and address the issue that we have before us.
If I could clarify.
Go right ahead.
Okay. I am fully on board with what you're saying, that we're going to break it up and we've got a process moving ahead and we'll be refining that. I was just wondering what one was of greater urgency that we may wind up needing to address before then. And then I do have a final comment.
Yeah, that was the policy 612.1, certificated teacher employment and certified teacher qualifications. And after further consideration and research, we feel like we could accomplish some of the changes that we need to in AR rather than amending policy.
Oh,
okay. Thanks for that clarification. And then my final thing, I just wanted to say, and I guess that I really appreciate, since we had a little bit of a hiatus on policy reviews for just a lot of things on our plates as a district, but getting towards that, and in reference to President Sanderson's comments that she was very instrumental in helping us get to this beginning work, and the board as a whole in selecting AASB for the platform for our policies, that sets a stage for us to really move forward. And yes, we've got a lot of work ahead of us, and we will take it in chunks. But I just wanted to say that I think it's really important and timely for our board to do this, and both with the administrative work on this and the board leadership to do it. Thank you.
With additional comments. All right, I think that closes that out. It brings us to our board comments. We'll start. Did we ever get our colonels online?
Colonel Alvarado.
Can you guys hear me?
Way!
All right.
Holy smoke. Okay, well, it was actually wonderful being with you guys, even though I really wasn't, but I was really here in spirit. I feel really bad because I was afraid I wasn't going to get to say goodbye to Miss April, so I will share this with you guys real quick.
Go right ahead.
If you guys can see that, coupled with,
We can't see anything.
oh man, well, I'll bring them next time.
Okay.
But again, hey, Miss April, it was such a pleasure sitting next to you. Obviously, we don't always agree, but I tell you what, I love, just as Mr. Doran said, the thought-provoking, making people challenge the way they think, and I really enjoyed the asymmetric way that you think, and that's what really drives progress and moving forward, and I can't thank you enough for that. And I'm going to miss cramming your space because I know how much you enjoyed that. But overall, thank you so much. And it was such a pleasure seeing you all and great to see you smile. So, thank you very much again.
All right, thank you, sir. Is Colonel Cole, are you on? Okay, I'm sorry. Okay, we'll go to our student, Mr. Lopez.
Thank you. So during the OSOG State Conference at West Valley last weekend, there was a lot of resolutions coming from our district that got approved. Therefore, I find that some of them can be easily implemented into our district. There was 5 resolutions that were brought up through Region 6. And I think it's greatly disheartening to people when the resolutions that go through OSOG don't get implemented and no changes made after all. One of the resolutions brought through and passed unanimously by West Valley High School talks about the policy change to allow students to decorate their graduation caps in order to promote individuality and diversity, as well as enhance the celebratory nature of graduation. Since this is a simple policy change, I found this to be extremely easy to put through. I would encourage the board to find the resolution on the OSOG website. I don't think it's on there right now, or I can send you the resolution myself. And if I could get any aid from the administration on what resources that I'm able to use as a student rep to put the policy into the board's hand, that'd be greatly appreciated. And I think the policy, I don't know if this is a thing, it's 985.4, but it's just a little confusing, the whole thing, but thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Marati?
I wanted to request that if you can send us those resolutions, your voice and the voice of our students is incredibly important. And I'm more than happy to help lift that voice and see what we can do to get those resolutions passed.
Ms. Marati, go ahead with your comments.
No other comments. Thanks.
Ms. Barnett?
Thank you, President Sanderson. My final comments for the evening. This Saturday, Lathrop Football Championship game, Saturday, 1 p.m. versus Soldotna. Lathrop is, of course, the defending champions for the past 2 years. Soldotna, though, they won it. So going to be a really good game this Saturday. It's not here. It is in Anchorage. If you don't have the opportunity to be down there, we are actually broadcasting it live on 107.9 ESPN Radio Fairbanks. So you have an opportunity to listen in there, and I expect some good football this Saturday. Congratulations to all the students making their high school teams. Hockey tryouts were this past week, so congratulations to all of them. City Hall is having a trick-or-treating event coming up on October 31st, 3 to 6 p.m. So bring the kids, have some fun, go trick-or-treat there at City Hall. They're decorating like all of it, and you can vote on the themes and all the decorations, and it's supposed to be a good time. So 3 to 6, bring all the kids, wear your costumes. It's going to be fun. Big shout out to Dr. Meinert, Chain Beam, everybody who's been involved with the podcast, Miss LaPlante, Miss Gillum. I have loved every episode. Absolutely phenomenal. I love the innovation, and I think that it's going to take our district far. So really big kudos to that. It's amazing. And of course, thank you for the just the advancements in communications that we've had. I know we've said that a lot, but it really is appreciative. And just know those comments went far, especially with the focus group that we did involving the communications. And I know many of us really highlighted the fact that the last few months have been really great communications wise. So thank you for that. I'd like to give a huge shout out to Lathrop Jr., Daniel Cheney. Daniel, if I pronounce your last name wrong, I'm really sorry. But he got to be a guest musician this past weekend for Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, and it was so cool. I don't know if you know who Big Bad Voodoo Daddy is, one of my favorite swing bands ever. And this kid got up there and just, oh my goodness. Daniel, you're amazing, kiddo. You are amazing. Just great job. So cool. Big Bad Voodoo Daddy got to go into our schools, and just absolutely amazing when something like that gets to happen. So real big kudos for that. And that's really awesome for you, Daniel. So proud of you. And then last but not least, Durham is hiring. I know that's a thing, right? We all chuckle, but really, truly, I was fortunate to be involved in their hiring event that they had this past Saturday. And they really are truly trying their hardest to get routes filled, get monitor positions filled. So if you're looking for a job, Durham, they're having walk-in interviews every day, 10 to 2, Monday through Friday. So if you're looking, help us fill our routes and get more buses out there. It's all Durham wants, it's all we want. So 10 to 2, Monday through Friday, go check out Durham. They really, truly are a great group of people over there. 3319 Industrial Avenue is where they're located. And that will wrap up my comments. Admin, thank you for tonight.
Mr. Dorn?
Thank you. As I mentioned earlier, the Assembly recessed their meeting from last Thursday to this coming Thursday, the 19th, after their Committee of the Whole. And the first item that they'll be addressing again is the idea of moving the municipal elections from October to November. Since it's a continued meeting, the reps are still welcome to be there on the dais. And to participate. But just want to that we keep that on our radar. The Budget Committee, our next meeting is the 25th, and we'll be continuing our discussions, getting down into some more of the nitty-gritty and the begin formulating some of our considerations as we go forward in advising the administration and the board regarding next year's budget. As was mentioned with the music, what struck me this fall is that several of the music groups, including at the Folk Festival back in September, and then, yes, Big Bad Voodoo Daddy, they had opportunities to work with our students, for the artists, the groups that sponsored those artists being here. It really makes a difference. But what most struck me is that in each of those situations, and Daniel Cheney, by the way, played at both concerts, but with other students. But the big thing was the artists themselves talked about our students and our music staff and how much it meant to them to meet and work with our students. And I think that's the biggest compliment. And kudos to our district when people come from outside and they have those opportunities. They see how they're welcomed, how they're received, and what our students are able to do and step up. So it's great to get those. And then last, what a pleasure it was to attend a little bit of the OSOG. Mr. Lopez did tell me that indeed I should have come back for the dance with my wife that night. But two things that really stood out for me. One was I was at one of their general assemblies where they were doing discussions about the resolutions, and to watch that process and the seriousness they took in presenting their cases, pros and cons, and so forth, an explanation of why the background for the resolutions, that itself was edifying. But I also enjoyed the fact as they came into the West Valley Performing Arts Center, the energy that was there. And I have to admit that some of the cheers, I could not quite make it out. The noise, the energy, the excitement was, they were fine. They knew it. It just was overwhelming to me. But I just reveled in that opportunity to hear those back and forth calls and the enthusiasm and camaraderie that was developing among those, as we said, young leaders. So just a real pleasure. Thanks for that highlight, and the fact that to West Valley for helping to host that, and for all the other sponsors that came from different districts to make that a possibility for our students across the state.
Ms. Hardy?
To add to the Budget Committee, there are still openings, and you can apply online. It's pretty simple. It's just a Google form, and if you were to apply tonight, you could definitely attend that meeting on the 25th, and we would love to have you. Parent-teacher conferences are coming up. Those are going to be no school days on the 30th and the 31st. If you can find a way to attend, please do. This is, as a teacher, myself, one of those things that too often not enough people come in, and we want to talk to you about how wonderful your students are. We want to help problem solve with you. So please, if there's any way that you can do that, I know that there's times both later in the night and during the day. And a lot of ones you can sign up ahead of time depending on how your school runs it. And then the last is another shout out to Project Search. I got to go over and see actually former students of mine from Tananall participating in that program. And I am continually impressed at the diverse offerings that we give students, including those where these students defer graduation to attend Project Search. And the outcomes, they told us that over the past 5 years, they've had 87% of students that have gone through Project Search receive an employment offer at the end of it, and that's pretty exciting.
And finally, Ms. Smith?
Thank you. I'd like to thank the board for the last 3 years, which have been the most frustrating and complicated 3 years. And for the community for trusting me. And that's it.
All right. I don't have any closing comments. Thank the board for their work tonight, and I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move to adjourn.
Second.
Thank you. We are adjourned.